Good to go? Hey, everyone, we'll get rolling. Our last speaker of the day is Abby Meyer, who is the Executive Director of the U.S. Office of the Botanic Gardens Conservation International, where she works to provide tools and information to build botanic garden plant conservation collections and capacity. Abby is particularly interested in tracking botanic garden progress toward global strategy for plant conservation and North American botanic garden strategy for plant conservation targets. And today she'll discuss conservation horticulture capacity at botanic gardens.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Abby Meyer. I'm with the U.S. Office of BGCI, and so happy to be here. Thanks so much to Gary Krupnick and the team here at Smithsonian for organizing such a fantastic afternoon. It's been really, really interesting to hear everyone. Before we start, because it's late afternoon, my daughter is 7, and she's really into jokes. And I have a couple gardener jokes that I wanted to start off with just to lighten it up a little bit. Okay, what kind of socks does a gardener wear? Garden hose. Okay, this one's, I'm kind of a math nerd, so what do you get if you divide the circumference of a pumpkin by its diameter? Pumpkin pie. Ha ha ha. And why didn't anyone laugh at a gardener's jokes? Because they were corny. Wah wah. It's a good one to end on. So today I'm here, I'm gonna put this on the floor. Today I'm here to talk about specialized expertise called conservation horticulture. And first, I'd like to acknowledge this great partnership with the U.S. Botanic Garden that's getting on 20 years long partnership with BGCI US that we're really grateful for, and that enabled the work on this topic. First, BGCI, I just want to explain, is a global plant conservation network of botanic gardens, and we're working together to prevent plant extinction around the world. We have about 900 member gardens, and our headquarters are based at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew. And we have several regional offices around the world, including the US office, and I am based at the Huntington Library and Botanical Gardens in the Los Angeles area. Our work in North America is largely supported through partnerships, such as with the USBG, but also through public support. And we work to engage over 3,500 botanic gardens around the world in plant conservation action, best practices, and sharing knowledge. Okay, just a quick framing, which we've heard earlier today, actually, which will make my job easier. About 1 in 5, maybe 2 in 5, but that the threatened species that have been assessed, we know that at least 1 in 5 species around the world are threatened with extinction. And even in places like California, where I live, that proportion is much higher. We see that plants are facing tremendous threats in rural and urban areas, and much of it is through land conversion. And in the past decade, the human race has reached a stunning milestone. We have permanently altered over 50% of non-frozen parts of Earth, which is great. Just mentioning that I live in Los Angeles, a metropolitan area of about 4 million acres with about 15 million people. And here where we sit as well, over half of the US population is within a couple of hours of here. So I think we can all relate to the scale of the problem. As Ray Mims at the US Botanic Garden often says, plants are not optional. And plant diversity enables human innovation, adaptation, and resilience. As we eliminate plant diversity, even by a single species, we are reducing our options for future survival. And plant-based solutions are required to address all the major environmental challenges that we're facing. So as humans are causing unprecedented change across the globe, I have also just the good news to share that we are also the solution. This is the Global Botanic Garden community. It's over 3,500 institutions that collectively maintain at least 30% of known plant diversity, and that includes at least 40% of known threatened species. They employ collectively about 60,000 technical experts who know how to grow and document the plants of most terrestrial ecosystems on Earth. And collectively, Botanic Gardens engage approximately 1 billion visitors every year. This makes the Botanic Garden community the world's greatest force for plant conservation. And what I see from my desk every day is the collective conservation capacity of this community. And I'm really excited about the current moment we're in, where we are really poised to scale up conservation to the regions and species that need it the most. I'll just point out, as you can see just visually on this map, only 30% of gardens are located in the most biodiverse regions of the world. So there is an imbalance of resources and institutions that we really we're working to refocus and redistribute. So we've alluded to conservation horticulture throughout the day, and I think we've had some really great examples of what it actually means. And I just want to put out this definition that BGCI uses, and it was actually first coined in the 1990s by Jim Affolter at the State Botanical Garden of Georgia and the University of Georgia. And I just thank him for his vision and his leadership across the Botanic Garden community. And really this just acknowledging for the first time the specialized knowledge and practical skills that are required in horticulture specifically to meet conservation needs for species. And there's three main areas of work: ex situ collections that we've talked about, in situ action, as well as a really important outreach component to inspire and share information and knowledge. I will say that it's not super earth-shattering, this definition, but in recent years, there's been really some nice growing interest around really trying to amplify this unique set of skills for successful plant conservation. And also, when you look at the reality of how botanic gardens operate, often there is a separate horticulture department and a separate conservation department, or some institutions, the individual that is interested in conservation will do conservation in their free time, not during their work hours. So we can start to see value in recognizing this expertise and increasing or promoting the value to Botanic Garden leadership. And I'll just mention that all of the components of conservation horticulture really parallel this really unique set of skills and resources and expertise that Botanic Gardens offer. These attributes really make gardens unique for conserving plant species. Oftentimes, though, I'll just point out that those are separate teams of people doing each of these activities. And just to highlight those three areas again, I just want to mention that Botanic Gardens have the facilities and expertise to grow and maintain threatened plants, to preserve genetic diversity, which includes living plants, as well as seeds in seed banks and tissue culture collections and cryopreserved collections. So quite diverse living germplasm that's available throughout the world. And Botanic Gardens often have some of the world's leading repositories for wild species. As far as in situ conservation, Botanic Gardens are also very active in their local regions and also across the world in monitoring wild areas and threatened species and studying them through time. And then for outreach and education, as I mentioned, we've got quite a global voice within the community that's super powerful. And Botanic Gardens work as influencers, both online and on the ground, as they talk about the world around us. They celebrate the beauty and importance of plants and biodiversity through their inspiring landscapes, their cultural and education events, and their training programs. And as we face a global plant extinction crisis, widespread social change is going to be really critical. So along with the public support to affect broader change. So before we go any further, I want to take a little brief moment to talk about when I was first introduced in my life to conservation horticulture. And I believe there's a few folks from Nebraska where it's my home state. My family's tuning in, hey, remotely. But I worked on this lovely creature here, Penstemon haydenii. It's called the blowout penstemon, as an undergrad at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and I helped to grow these plants in the greenhouse. And I remember coming home one time to tell my mom, yeah, I'm using a sandblaster on these plants. My mom didn't quite understand, and it was quite a learning experience. So it turns out that these plants really grow well. They grow most healthy and strongest when they grow naturally in these blowouts of the sandhills of Nebraska. And naturally you get sand blowing around. So we would set, in the greenhouse, we would set the sandblaster on low setting, and a couple times a week, we would sandblast the seedlings to make them stronger and healthier for then planting out in the wild. And it's this type of horticulture, I think I'll just point out, that is really crucial. And we saw some examples earlier where you really have to crack the code for each species in order to know what it needs and how to make it successful across its conservation path. Okay, so a couple years ago, we did a global survey of conservation horticulture across Botanic Gardens. We really just wanted to know the current status of conservation horticulture and characterize what people are doing. And we heard from almost 250 people, which was really exciting, from about 180 institutions in 60 countries. And we got quite a broad diversity of representation. We did distribute our survey in English only. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And probably that's one of our limitations, but when we're working globally, it does get challenging with languages. So we did see a lot of responses from the US, so that's worth mentioning. We also saw a range of experience levels as well, ranging from 1 year all the way to 50 years. And then, looking at the average of around 20 years. So that was great. We first wanted to characterize current conservation horticulture work that's being done, and nearly all the respondents confirmed that their organization has a plant conservation program or they grow plants of conservation concern. So that automatically qualified them to answer these questions. The graph here shows that there's a wide range of ways that people reported working with species of conservation concern. And the most popular ones include living collections management, propagation, and public outreach. And those are not surprising. We also asked respondents separately if they feel an affinity more toward horticulture, if they were approaching conservation horticulture from the horticulture side of things or from the conservation side of things. And we actually found an even split of all the respondents. Some half, it's not going to be half, but an even amount said, maybe it was a third, an even amount said they come from the horticulture side mostly, and a third said plant conservation side, and then both equally made a difference for their work was the other third. So it was interesting to see that a variety of people approaching this work from a variety of angles. So we wanted to actually get some information about their own perceptions of conservation horticulture next. So we asked the respondents at the beginning of the survey do they consider themselves a conservation horticulturist? We presented the definition and several questions that elucidated what conservation horticulture is about. And then we asked them again at the end, do you consider yourself a conservation horticulturist? And we saw a really nice positive increase in the number of people that identified as, yes, I do, which are shown there. And we also asked, at the end, do you feel more aware or more, what was it? Has your perception of your involvement in conservation horticulture changed? And most people actually said, I either my view has not changed and I am engaged, or I realize I am more engaged than I previously thought, which those are actually really important points. That lack of awareness or recognition of what conservation horticulture expertise is could be one of the keys to us moving forward. I'll just mention that, let me keep moving on. Okay, really quickly, the most important learning experiences that we heard from folks is not so much formal education or training, which is one of the circles there that is written, but more hands-on experience in the lab or nursery, and also working with other experts. So collaborating and learning and even just interacting with other more experienced conservation horticulturists. So we thought that was really significant to point out. Also, hands-on experience in native habitats is actually really important. And the way people described it was, you can, and I definitely relate to this with the blowout penstemon, that when you see a plant growing in the wild, you really understand its needs really horticulturally a lot better. So speaking of needs, we also asked, what are some of the main needs that you see for furthering your career in conservation horticulture? And then we put the answers in bins of these 4 different bins, which were funding, which was more geared towards staff support and field work and training. But we'll see later that there's a training component as well. So that's a really common thread. We also saw mentorship and staff exchanges, which gets to that hands-on experience angle. And then information was also suggested, even species-specific information on propagation protocols, which we heard about from a few folks today. And then training, various types of training. There were 2 main types of training that people tended to talk about, which were seed conservation training and conservation genetics training. So those are good context for helping guide future activities that we might want to do. Following the survey, we selected 2 different sites to interview further, and that is the Atlanta Botanical Garden and then this garden in Wellington, New Zealand. And we really just wanted to take a deep dive into understanding the different entry points into this field of conservation horticulture, how their career paths evolved or unfolded, and then basically what along their journey was useful. So that can help us guide, maybe future career developing. So what we found was that there are many different entry points into the field and the work of conservation horticulture, and that we had a variety of degrees represented, and even undergraduate versus graduate. So that's, I think that's not surprising, since conservation horticulture does span such broad sort of realms of study and expertise. And then some of the most valuable learning experiences, just to boil it down, was really more of these hands-on experiences with through internships or work that they started in their career. And someone mentioned this full circle experience that I thought really drove home a really nice concept, which is seeing the plant basically from a wild population in need to then propagating, growing it in a healthy way, and then reintroducing it back to the wild full circle, and being able to experience that in the fullness of that process it was and is valuable to a lot of folks working in this arena. Also, they just mentioned trial and error with working with many different kinds of plants and then getting propagation experience. They tended to express that those were some of the more valuable things that they've done. So overall, what we found through this survey was that we really feel like awareness and perspective seem to be critical factors, and that if we even just start talking about conservation horticulture or giving it a name, a more proper name in the community, that we might actually get more uptake and more recognition across our field. And then the hands-on training in the field, nursery, and lab are some of the more effective ways. And that might actually have some connections with how adults learn as well, which is really good. And then also, just to underscore this other point, that institutional value and priority by garden leadership seem to be a very important factor, whether a conservation horticulturist, whether these survey respondents felt recognized by their institution as a conservation horticulturist really comes down to this institutional culture, whether conservation was in their job title or job description, or even in their mission of their organization. So lots of intersections there having to do with even changing the hearts and minds of leadership at the institutional level. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples next of how BGCI and other partners are trying to answer this call to provide more resources and thinking around conservation horticulture. But I'll just mention we want to do more, and we don't have all the answers. So we're looking for ideas and would really love to talk with you more if anyone has thoughts on this. And also, I'll just mention one of the suggestions in the survey was for a more formality around this expertise and even a possible certification program, sort of like the ISA arborist, arboriculture certification, where around the world there's this international standard that doesn't exist yet. But that was maybe some blue sky thinking that we could talk about further today. So one of the ways that we support conservation horticulture is in gathering the community. And this August, we're very excited. Every 3 years, we could have a Global Botanic Garden Congress. And this year it's in Singapore in August. And I just got news today, actually, that my conservation horticulture session was accepted. So we will be having a workshop on conservation horticulture, which I'm excited about. We also have, in between these in-person meetings, we have these online training modules that we've launched just a couple of years ago. And we're getting hundreds of staff from all over the world logging in and taking these courses. And these are some that are relevant to conservation horticulture that I'll point out. But that has, I think, a lot of possibility for developing further. I'll also mention that we fund conservation horticulture, and our call for applications is open right now. Every May, we have all of our grant programs, and people can apply online to those. And we fund species conservation efforts that do most of the time involve conservation horticulture. I'll also mention that through a partnership with USBG, we're working on an information sharing tool around propagation data per species, which I'm really excited about. And I think this summer, we're going to try to collect some data to test our data model and standardize it. So we know that there's some really great repositories of data at gardens currently, and that they might have shared it in different ways, but having a one-stop shop location for this information might actually help us see relationships across plant groups, and who knows where it would take us. I'll also say This exciting program that I help to support called the Global Conservation Consortia is another great way we gather people together to share best practices around taxonomic groups. We make these global teams that are experts in each of these groups, get them together and meet regularly. We co-fundraise on projects. We do species assessments. We create work plans and prioritize species and do gap analysis, all of it. And really, if you're interested in any of these, and there's even a few more I haven't listed of any of these plant groups, we'd love to have your input and collaboration. The last thing I want to talk to you or show you really is a really exciting program that we're just entering our 4th year of. And this has been something that's been like personally really inspiring to see. And it's the Keller Scholarship in Conservation Horticulture, which is a GCA scholarship that's offered annually to undergraduates. And in partnership with BGCI, we select undergraduate students each year to be hosted at a botanic garden in the US to gain conservation horticulture experience. And we actually have Ann Gates from the GCA with us today, who's been a really great collaborator for all 4 years and has seen us through. But these 4 students listed here were the cohort that just finished this last year at Atlanta Botanical Gardens, San Diego, Cornell, and in Miami at Fairchild. Across the country, we're engaging these students, and I'm really excited. We have 3 more selected for this year that are also distributed geographically. We've got one at Lion Arboretum in Hawaii, Gracie Ann, who's pictured here. And then we have a student working at Morton Arboretum in Illinois, and then Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center in Texas. So we're very excited about the impact this is having on individual students' lives in engaging them in conservation horticulture and showing them that this can be a really viable and super crucial career path. So this is the hope that I cling to for the future for conservation horticulture. And that is where I'm going to end for now, but thank you so much for your attention today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, Abby. So we have a question online from George asking about your deep dive surveys. You mentioned that you interviewed people in Atlanta and in New Zealand. He thinks just doing 2 organizations just touches the surface, and that he would have chosen at least 1 per region, or better, a statistical significant random sample of all potential organizations. So your thoughts, how did you pick those 2?
I would love the time and resources to make a fuller data set surrounding the characterization of conservation horticulture. I think that's a great idea. We do need more information. I think that would be helpful. We wanted to take a start at it with the scope that we had available to us. And also in this first sort of effort of describing conservation horticulture, we're now taking it and we're socializing what we found and seeing if it makes sense to people and trying to engage more partners as we go along. So that's a great thought.
You mentioned at the beginning, there were obviously different approaches that different gardens take towards conservation horticulture. Some people are doing conservation sort of in their spare time, and others have a dedicated staff. Or do you have best practices that you found so far? Is it better to try and engage all staff of a botanic garden, have a dedicated conservation department, have it integrated with the education and outreach sides? How best do you see conservation horticulture working within botanic gardens?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. I I think conservation horticulture can be looked at in a very flexible way, but it's most efficient when those skills of education and genetic diversity management and in situ practices, if those are all combined in one person's mind, It's super efficient to implement usually on a species by species basis. However, currently, I would say the reality of conservation horticulture often exists across teams of people, and getting those people to talk to one another and work together can be challenging, but I think it's not impossible. And so approaching this building of conservation horticulture capacity, or even converting the capacity that's there to focus on conservation horticulture, I think that's really fascinating and really the viable approach for scaling up across the community. I'll also mention though that I lost my thought. I'll come back to it though if I think of it. Thanks.
Yeah, two people asked the exact same question at the exact same time. Dina and Jessica both ask, is this report, are the survey results available online, and where can they find that?
Oh, great question too. Actually, I have great news. In the next week or so, we are going to be actually publishing that report. So there will be more details soon, and you can join BGCI's newsletter online for free at our website. And that is how you would get news about this report and other things that are going on across the community and across BGCI. So please feel free to join or email me if you want.
Hello.
Oh, I just thought of my second thought. Thank you for that pause. Just that I don't think that conservation horticulturists should be a separate species of human. And that I think every horticulturist at a botanic garden honestly is asked to play a conservation horticulture role in one way or another often. And so I think that we could actually think of switching the entire field of horticulture at botanic gardens to be more in line with conservation horticulture, more aligned.
I'm glad you said that. I was basically going to comment the same exact thing as a horticulturist at this museum. Someone who is embracing conservation horticulture because it seems necessary based on everything we've learned from every presenter today with species extinction across the globe. It seems ethically pertinent for every horticulturist and gardener to overlay conservation through their work. It's abundantly clear, and so this is more a comment, and thank you for calling this out and just giving light to it is immensely important.
Awesome. Thank you for that sentiment. I agree. I think, like you said, I think that conservation should be an overlaying theme across the work of any botanic garden today. And we're seeing more and more engagement across the botanic garden community on conservation in particular, and the importance of biodiversity preservation more broadly as well. And I think that's the main relevance for institutions like botanic gardens today. Hi.
Yes, hi. Thanks for highlighting this area. And I wanted to ask, as you promote the conservation element, how do you recommend that botanical gardens link with the land management agencies or other conservation agencies where they're trying to perhaps recover species or manage for threatened and endangered species?
Thank you for that. That is a great question as well. Many gardens around the world work and have really fantastic partnerships with land managers, federal and private landowners and land managers. I think we need to do more of that. And we're exploring pathways for making that more accessible by institutions like Botanic Gardens, who are often their own, nonprofit institutions by and large, and sometimes don't feel like they have an entry point into a federal agency or state agency. So I think there are some nice inroads forming some that have existed for a long time, and lots of great partnerships that exist that we can model and amplify, hopefully. But it's certainly relevant. I think any in situ work that Botanic Gardens do often overlays and overlaps with major land managers. Thank you.
All right, so it'll take us just a couple of minutes to set up for the panel discussion.